Greetings and welcome. I'm Matt Kelly here at PackSize. I head up our global business development. So my team is really the tip of the spear, trying to explain to customers, understand what customers are doing in their fulfillment process. And one of the topics today is very exciting and it's often overlooked is packaging, and really looking at packaging as a very integral part of the picking and fulfillment process, from the time that the conversation happens to the data is analyzed to the solution is concepted and presented to the customer, and then it's finally implemented and used. Everything matters. It's not just picking, it's not just packing. It really is everything within the four walls working together hand in hand. And so with me is Nick Soares, who's our Senior Director of Partnerships. He and I bring a tremendous amount of experience in this space, whether it be sortation systems, picking engines, packing. And so I think today is going to be a very interesting conversation. Nick, it's good to see you. It's good to be here with you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
So one of the kind of questions that was kind of top of mind for me is when an organization is looking at automation. I think quite often I've certainly seen that packaging is often an afterthought, and it gets deprioritized in much of the scope of work and the conversation that an organization has with a major OEM or an integrator. Why do you think that is? Why do you think packaging is often overlooked in some of these initial conversations and designs for a customer to look at?
Yeah, I think one reason is, it's easy to push packing out because it's something that, people perceive to be easy to do later. But if when designing a building or designing a goods to person system, if you're not thinking about automating packing, it actually becomes much more difficult and much more constraints to add packaging later. And you just get a lot of bang for your buck automating picking. So, you see the flashy robots and the goods to person systems, and you see a lot of people removed from the facility. What often is overlooked, though, is that those people end up kind of just shifting more downstream to manual pack tables if it's not kind of attacked at the same time.
That's a great point, and it kind of ties back into there has to be an ROI at the end of the day. And the ROI is often looked at from subsystem to subsystem. Hey, can I get an ROI on this ASRS? Can I get an ROI on this sorter? Can I get an ROI on this one little, packaging machine? And I think quite often you end up doing things in piecemeal. And then at the end of the day, the people that actually look at the whole warehouse and the P&L go, well, where's our ROI? We just shifted all these pickers. Now they're over here. Packaging is still manual. What happened? Well, let's automate packing. Well, the problem at that point, and I'm curious your opinion here, is doing things kind of retroactively. Once you want to then go automate packing, what kind of a challenge from a design standpoint does that present to the operation to now adopt something downstream that they didn't think about upstream? And is that flow really a significant bottleneck in how orders are received, picked, sorted, and then packed? I've certainly seen it. Curious your thoughts there, Nick.
Yeah, it really limits you in terms of touch reduction with packing. So, once you already have even a lighter automation like a pick module in place, or a goods to person system on the heavier automation, it's the infrastructure is already in place with the conveyor, how to route boxes. So you're more often than not going to just put everything into a tote and then feed it downstream to packing. So, it helps with picking and not having to pick directly into the box to get faster pick rates potentially. But now you're double touching things later, and it's really difficult to add in sequencing right size boxes to a pick station at a goods to person system after the fact. So that's where we use our Everest or Impact or X7 systems and just get everything out of the goods to person system, convey it to a single point. But now you need the space. You're going to have more space considerations that you have to design around downstream. And then you're going to add touches to the process that could have been eliminated if you just pick directly into the carton from the get-go.
Yeah. So you called out a couple things, and I think it's important for the audience to understand, when you're designing these types of systems where you want to really eliminate, extra touches, and you want to enable a picker to also pack, the amount of sequencing and coordination that has to happen between the ASRS system or whatever the picking engine is and the packing element is significant. And if that's not coordinated very well, it can cause serious bottlenecks or it can cause extra touches, which adds labor cost, which adds complexity, which adds time with which an order can be fulfilled and shipped out the door. So your SLA becomes even more stressed. And one of the things I noticed when I was working for a major grid system, goods to person grid system, was we had several pack size implementations and discussions, and it was all about how do we sequence the right size carton that a picker at a port or workstation is going to pick that product into and then send it downstream. Now, that wasn't an easy thing to do, and that was probably 5, 6 years ago where pack size was really knocking on the door of high automation, and it was not an easy thing. And I really kind of was proud to represent several of the integrators who were able to figure out the sequencing between a major ASRS and the packaging element, because for the customer, now they can look at their operation and go, we're covered end to end. We've got the right goods to person, storage, picking, put away, workflow, and then it feeds right into packing. And we have the absolute leanest labor force in order to get the same amount of orders out in the SLA required by the customer. On the flip side, right, that's box first. So that's presenting the box to the workstation for that single touch pick to pack. But then we also have a tremendous amount of customers who have unfortunately, invested in automation upstream that has probably created a bottleneck that they did not anticipate at the packaging level. And that would be, a brownfield facility where it's not easy to reinvent how they pick. It's not easy to sequence the right size box to that picking workflow. And so the box last type of solution, which is, a part of our portfolio as well, is really advantageous for them to look at, where regardless of what you're doing at picking, all the product and the picker or packer has to do is place that item on the conveyor belt, and the box is built around it. You don't need DIMMs, you don't need waste, you don't need any of the sequencing elements. It's very easy to kind of implement in a brownfield, very intuitive for that process. And so we're lucky as the OEM to be able to provide two different solutions depending on where a customer is. But from my perspective, especially working with some of the major integrators like you and I do, the earlier we can start these conversations about how you're going to pack, the less bottlenecks we kind of have to fix and band-aid over in the years after these things go live. So I think, Nick, when you're kind of working with some of the big integrators and your experience, with some of the arm picking and sortation companies, how important, in your opinion, is the end-of-line process in the design side of things, and how does that really get factored into the business case and the discussion between a major integrator and all the subsystems like a pack size that have to be considered before they move forward with that?
Yeah, super important, obviously, and you touched on a good point with pack size being able to do, we call it box first or pick to box or box last, where you may be picking the tote and bringing the product to one of our systems, is because the data is going to tell the story. Working at the goods to person system, we may have both. We may be able to do, omni-channel, where we have wholesale orders picking directly into the box that we can work with the systems integrator on the design of, what the right solution is, how we want to close the boxes. Are we going to use, a tray and lid, or are we going to use, a box with flaps and taped? And then maybe there's a high amount of single unit orders. We may batch pick out of dedicated ports or pick stations and then send them to one of our box last systems. So if we're in the design on the front end, not only will pack size do the kind of heavy lifting on, machine qualification, what the sizing is of the solution, but also what the impact is and how we can impact the overall ROI of the goods to person system by including packing. Because if you're increasing your pick rates maybe from 70, 80 units per hour up to 300, 400 units per hour, lines per hour, you need packing to match that rate. Otherwise, we said before, you're just going to move that labor, and they're going to be packing 70 units an hour downstream of the system, and then you're going to see your goods to person system, and it can end up getting clogged up.
Yeah.
So that's where we like working, and really my whole role is working with the systems integrators to help them feel more comfortable working with pack size, with the technology, and really what our use cases are.
Have you noticed any issue, because I certainly haven't, with pack size being able to pack at the speed that picks take place? I mean, you've got some shuttle systems out there that can pick, 800, 900 units per hour. Have you noticed any scenario or any application where the packaging side can't keep up with that type of rate?
No, even if you think about our largest customer, we have 48 of our X5 systems, feeding a shuttle system. We just look at what the design rates we need to hit, and then what the best process flow is. That so if we need to break some orders up for box last or box first, so we're going to build a solution based on design rates to match the throughput needed. But really, we're just looking at the design rates, the hour rates where you need to hit, and then we have systems that go from 100 cartons an hour up to 1,100 per hour. So typically, we can find the right fit once we're involved in early enough. We can acquire the space needed to put our systems in.
Yeah, and one of the things I've noticed too, especially in the spare parts side of things, whether that be, industrial spare parts or automotive spare parts, is, they're not just looking for end of line automation, they're also looking for automation on inbound. And we've seen a number of applications, and I know you've been privy to a few of these with some of the big ones that we've been working on with our X6 machine, where a company is bringing in master cartons of product, and they have to then decant them into smaller, containers. And historically, traditionally, that's all a manual process where they have to put these small little parts into small boxes because that's the unit that they're going to sell them in, and that's how they want to put
Mhm.
them away and store them. And so I've noticed really as our portfolio of technology and solutions has expanded, the applications within the four walls have also grown. And we can influence not only the end of line, and also what happens at the pick, but also what happens in the decanting and put away process. And I think that's quite compelling. I mean, I've seen designs where we have an X6 on inbound. We've got an X5 feeding the right size box to a workstation or to a port at the pick. And then for anything else that maybe there aren't weights and dims for, you can slap it on a box last machine, and the right size box is created around it for final shipment. So, to me, that's fantastic. And then I'll be remiss to not include the non-conveyables. We have a machine for all those big and ugly items that it's very hard to find stock boxes for and to store them in a cost-effective way. So I do have a question though on the non-conveyable side. We have a lot of integrators that focus on conveyables, they focus on ASRS, and high volume pick to pack workflows. But then there's all these other items within certain operations that are still very manually handled and manually packed, and it's a tremendous strain on the operation to be able to stock the RSC that maybe can pack that item not quite the right size. Do you feel like integrators and true material handling experts are starting to recognize that the world of non-conveyable packaging, even within a high throughput facility, is a tremendous, area that we can influence and provide value in?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's especially when, looking at, brownfield opportunities going back to existing customers where, maybe they already sold the goods to person system, and, they're working with their continuous improvement teams, at existing customers. That's an area that's really glaring for us because it's not as disruptive, implementing on-demand packaging in the non-conveyable area because there's typically, dedicated space for it. There's not a bunch of infrastructure getting goods in and out of or orders in and out of that area because it's non-conveyable. So you're dropping pallets off potentially or large carts. And then the packers have, that area have the hardest job, of any of the packers in the building because, not only do they have to pick up these heavy items, they have to figure out how to pack it because they probably don't have a box size that it fits in. So they may be taking two boxes and trying to tape them together to fit items in. And we typically have a really fast payback in these areas because, while it may not be a high amount of volume, in the total building, but the percent savings per order is so high because, dimensional weight, how much material they're using. They're probably buying these boxes on more shorter runs because they don't use as many of them. So there's higher material savings and transportation savings in this area, without having to disrupt the entire flow of the building to be able to implement something. And typically we're in a smaller footprint, where we can operate maybe in a 15 by 20, 25 foot work cell, replacing 5, 6, 7 pack stations.
It's not easy. The footprint is always a challenge. We have some high automation equipment that does take up a significant amount of room. But to me, what's encouraging is, that we do have some solutions that, regardless of what has been done before, it can certainly apply and not cause significant disruptions in the flow. I'm a big believer, and I think, PackSize certainly aligns to this. We want to partner with and come alongside the end users that we support and the integrator partners that we work with and sell through. And I think to do that, you need a portfolio that kind of meets the customer where they are in their automation journey. And not everybody is in a greenfield type of scenario. A lot of times it is, hey, we have to stay in this building. We're out of room. What can we do to put some type of equipment or solution in that can replace a significant amount of real estate, whether that's manual pack stations or whether that's just pallets and pallets of boxes that are unerected sitting there waiting to be selected for orders, and then shipped with a lot of air and space and dunnage and tremendous cost. And I don't think those conversations are easy. And I think there's a lot of customers that maybe are excited about exploring some of this, but they do look at the change management of some of these implementations, and it can be overwhelming. Have you noticed, greater adoption, among end users, and then, partners and consultants who are able to really explain to end users that implementing these solutions, whether it's greenfield or brownfield, box first, box last, doesn't come with a significant lift, but just enough to really provide that ROI that does make it worth it. Like, how do you truly, see integrators positioning pack size and packaging as a whole, in a way that is easy for companies and customers to kind of move forward with confidently?
Mhm. Yeah, and so to answer to the unique part about pack size is we start engagements from multiple different avenues. So it's not just one department that brings pack size in. It's not just operations that every time we're going to improve packing, and it's not. It could be procurement because they're looking at their box cost, the material cost. It could be the logistics department because they see how much they're paying in transportation. They're getting hit on dim. Could be marketing because they're the customer experience of receiving the orders that their damage rate is high, and they're having crushed boxes. So it's always been interesting with pack size, and part of one of the fun parts about working is here is you see so many different things, and you deal with so many different departments. But at the end, it helps the decision making unit come to a yes. Get more people that were impacting with the building. So when I think about who the systems integrators are working with, I think on the engineering, the operations, supply chain side, we're starting to bring more people to the table and help them get deals over the line because we're getting marketing people in the room to say yes, sustainability people in the room. So it's we're getting more people to reach that same consensus, and that's helping push our projects over the line than maybe other ones that they're looking at.
That's a good point. I mean, I think, and we have a few new people joining the team, and we were just having this conversation the other day about, who gets involved in this decision-making process and who matters to this process. And it's actually quite vast. You've got marketing because this is direct consumer, often experience for a customer opening a box at their door. You've got operations where throughput and cost of labor is critical. You've got finance that are looking at the numbers. You've got engineering that has to sign off on the software, and IT has to approve of the integration. And don't forget legal. I mean, it's a vast amount of stakeholders, all for an end of line solution. And I think that's why it's so important for integrators and for system providers to look at packaging as part of the whole solution, because by the time you get through all that discussion to implement an ASRS system or some type of convey and sort solution with controls and integration, all that, you might as well look at the packaging side, because guess what? The customer is going to start screaming about it pretty soon. And I saw this all the time when we were at Modex a few weeks ago. Customers would come up and they would say, "Listen, we've got this solution and we need this. So I'm watching what you guys have on display here, and this is exactly what we need. I don't need to be an engineer to say that that's exactly what we need." And that was both encouraging but also frustrating, because if I was somebody who had to provide value day in and day out to a customer, and I've already supplied them with just about every piece of material handling equipment I can think of, and I haven't looked at the packaging process, then shame on me. Oh, and by the way, when I look at the packaging process, I probably would have done something a little different on the picking and put away process. And so, to me, that's the biggest call out, for anybody who's looking to provide value, in the four walls of an operation, is do not forget about the packaging process, because it can cause a significant bottleneck if it's not done right. And if it's not thought about on the picking, you may, incorrectly design the picking process. So one of the things that, Nick, I do want your perspective on, is, when, and I've certainly been at organizations where scale was a significant value sell. Hey, just buy what you need today, and it's very easy to scale. It's flexible, future flexibility, all that kind of thing. When things aren't going to scale, what are some of the early indicators that a customer has maybe invested in something that is not going to grow with them as they grow? And how does that kind of relate to their decisions around the packaging process?
For pack size, we got started with the packaging as a service model. So that's always helped us grow with our customers. So if I think back, some of our big logo customers may have started with, IQ Fusions or EM7s. And as we've developed new technology, we've grown with them. So we've either replaced systems or added to them. So when we look at scaling with customers, Staples is probably our best example. They've been very public with us. They started with IQ Fusions and they've gone up to with X4s now. So we were able to work with them to eliminate some labor associated with the packing. And then as we need to hit higher throughput requirements, we just kind of build in that space on the front end and then add systems as they need them without having to invest heavy capital.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. I mean, from a commercial standpoint, flexibility standpoint, partnership standpoint, I think the as a service model is critical, because it's not easy to predict 5, 10 years out. And I think we have comforted a lot of end users and helped decisions be made much easier when you can do it as a service. So you don't have to worry about obsolescence. You don't have to worry about a company, 3xing their volume, and now the machine that once aligned to their daily needs now is totally obsolete. To me, that's a very compelling commercial benefit of pack size, is that as a service model where we can swap the machine out, we can add a high throughput machine and take the low automation machine out. But also, I think from a technical standpoint, there's a software element too, and there's a technical service element to all that we do at pack size, and then all that our integrators represent. The worst thing, and I had a call just recently with a major retail brand where all the integrators they've worked with are sunsetting not only their hardware but their software as well. And I think it's important, for us as part of this system, to work with integrators whose software is still viable. It's very flexible. It can influence other subsystems, whether it be a goods to person system or any convey and sort, and then also feed into pack size and sequence appropriately. There's no worse bottleneck that I've seen than a WES or WCS not working properly. And I've seen it both at the OEM, and I've seen it, even with customers I've spoken to in my time at pack size. And I think that's critical. And it goes to, what we do to onboard our partners, what we do to vet different integrators that we work with, because if you can't provide, end-to-end solution, the software, the support to go alongside of the whole solution, including the packaging element, then at the end of the day, the customer is going to have downtime that's going to make everyone who provided subsystems to the customer look pretty bad. And at the end of the day, our reputation is certainly important, but our customers' health and success is far more important. And that's something I think I'm proud to really stand behind. Is we're not looking for here's this equipment, let's place it and call it a day. We are a partner, and we're there for the long haul. Whether that's at the technical level, software support, or whether that is helping customers scale and grow, and finding the right machine to align to whatever workflow that makes sense for the fulfillment operation that they have today. So, yeah, I think that's all well said. I think one of the things Nick, I was thinking about too as we were talking, um, is that when integrators kind of approach a greenfield, and let's just say it's an e-commerce company that's looking to kind of scale and think about the future, what do you see integrators look at first and kind of analyze from a total holistic type of end-to-end solution? And how are we and your team coaching integrators and partners, and thus the customer, to really think about how to design this in a future-proof way when it comes to a greenfield solution?
Yeah, so we know pack size asks for information that systems integrators may not be asking for, data points, right? So we really care about the box sizes that they're using, and on top of the order data, right? So everyone's pulling WMS data to get, looking at batch factors for sizing solutions, what the throughput requirements are, peak, non-peak. But we want to look at, what is our impact, in terms of right sizing, cube size, and then can we reduce the amount of orders being shipped out? And that's a point that gets overlooked often, where we may be able to consolidate orders, and now we're impacting the design rate and lessening it because you don't need as many cartons to go out the door as previously they were when they were manual and using stock boxes. So I'd say once the goods to person system and the throughput rates are kind of finalized or designed, at least at the ROM level, we start looking at process wise of, what orders can we do pick to box? Do they have dimensional data? Are they able to collect the dimensional data? Do we need to work with them to set up a process on inbound so that way it can be more efficient picking directly into the box? Or are their SKUs just changing constantly where they're never going to collect it, and then we work with them to design a box last solution because it's just not efficient to collect the data on all these SKUs. So yeah, I say once there's a framework of the goods to person system, we've done a lot of work in our group of working directly with the OEMs to look at software integrations and designs of the various GDP providers. So that way we can go to the integrator with more of a ready to go or out of the box solution where they're not having to do all the design work on the front end by themselves.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, at the end of the day, we are a data-driven solution. It may do a pretty narrow thing, which is to pack a box and create something that the customer can ship out to the customer. But it is data-driven, and we are looking at WMS data. We want to understand the orders, and a lot of times, this is part of the consulting and the advice that we provide to an end user. It's not just pick this system and good luck. Sometimes it is influencing how they go about picking, how they go about sorting, and how they distribute their labor in those initial upstream processes, based on kind of how we're going to lay out the packing process. So I think that's critical, and that's applicable whether it's greenfield or brownfield. And I think that's what's quite exciting is a lot of the integrators we work with, they are working on greenfield opportunities with some of their customers, but then they also have those same customers have existing facilities, some of which are swapping out equipment, some of which are at the end of life, and they're looking to replace and rethink how they, move product throughout the four walls. So looking at data, looking at boxes, looking at every little percent of cost that we can carve out, I think is critical. I was on a call the other day with a consultant who was talking about the 3PL space and talking about how, the dim factor and freight rates are so critical and they're so costly for these organizations, and they're often overlooked along with packaging. And we were discussing, a 3PL can save their end user on the actual material cost, but then the 3PL can make often more money on that parcel because they're reducing the size. It's now a right sized, and on that truck that they're shipping out, they can fit more parcels on there. So to me, when you think about pack size, there's so many ways to look at the business case and the benefit that this solution provides, whether it's shrinking the labor at packing, whether it is changing and making more efficient the picking to pack process and that handoff from those two departments and workflows, whether it's cutting material waste out of the individual unit, whether it's increasing the customer experience so that they're not opening a massive box with a tiny thing of lipstick or toothpaste in it, whether it's reducing the amount of freight that a company has to incur to ship product all over the world. I mean, the amount of benefits are almost overwhelmingly positive and broad, and I think it makes building a business case both exciting and also overwhelming because the value is really everywhere. And so to me, if I was an integrator, I would probably start both on the front end and the back end simultaneously. And I would meet in the middle with a few different options of how a company is going to store product, decant product, pick, put away, and ultimately pack. And all those communications and the flow between them are so critical. And the tighter they are, the less touches. That's how you get to a point where you can have an SLA under 20 minutes, which there is an e-commerce company that does. From the time the customer places an order on their website to the time it leaves the building, it takes 18 minutes. And that's only possible when every element of the solution is thought about, from storage, picking, put away, and ultimately packing and shipping. So to me, this has been, a great conversation. Nick, definitely appreciate it. The insight you bring from your time and advanced robotics and material handling, and your time at Pack Size has been great. And I think we have tremendous potential to really influence and provide value to the market in an area that unfortunately has been often overlooked in the area of high automation historically, but that's changing, and I feel it changing. I felt it at Modex, where customers are coming up and they're saying, pointing to that machine and saying, "We need that, and we need it now," and that's exciting.
Yeah, and I would kind of end with this too is, we've been collecting data on our impacts of current customers over the last several years. And we know on average, not including labor, we're saving over 50 cents per carton shipped for our customers. And as working these projects with systems integrators over the last 2 years, on average, we're taking 6 to 12 months off of the payback of the total project because we're starting to include, the additional labor savings of picking into right-sized cartons, but also the material savings and the transportation savings that, were often overlooked or not included in these business cases. So, these are one of the instances where adding in the system is really going to drive down the payback, plus have, the outside the four wall benefits that integrators typically aren't seeing, which would be, transportation savings, customer experience, and then sustainability.
Yeah, it's a good point on the sustainability. I totally forgot that, but that's going to be a huge driver in the coming years. I think by 2030, there's quite a few municipalities, certainly in Europe, but also locally in the United States, that are going to start to mandate certain organizations to really reduce their carbon footprint, and it's going to start with packaging. And I think there's going to be a tax on a lot of these organizations if they do not right size and they do not consider the environmental impact that packaging, whether it be plastic or corrugate, has on the environment. So that's a good call out, and a good call out about the overall ROI. If you can save 6 months plus on the payback of a total system that maybe costs $50 to $100 million, that's a pretty significant change in the payback structure and the time to value.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been a tremendous discussion. It's not an easy topic. Automation is not easy to do. It's not easy to design. It's why we're in business. And we feel a little bit of job security, knowing that there's a level of complexity, but the benefit and upside is tremendous for the market and for our customers. And we're very proud and honored to have the partners and to have the customers who have trusted PackSize for their fulfillment needs and for their own customers' experience when they receive product, both at their door, but also in the retail locations that they service. If you have any questions, you can find us at packsize.com, and we'll also be on the road quite a bit at a variety of trade shows over the next few months that you can find us at. But we'll be waiting for you to stop by and see what on-demand right-size packaging can do for you. And we look forward to your questions, future engagement, and hopefully the chance to work with you. Thank you.